Dr. Savell, some people have raised concerns that BSE, which some people call mad cow disease, remains a threat to the food supply. Knowing what you know, how would you respond to that?
Well, clearly the risk of BSE was much greater back in the 1990s, actually started in the 1980s back in the Great Britain area. And all the programs that were put in place after it was discovered has been at the point of eliminating this as a risk, principally first in Europe, and then all the things that were put in place there came over here to the United States and allowed us to have a chance here in this country for it not to be a significant factor.
What kinds of strategies did we use to make sure that the U.S. never suffered the experience that the British had?
Well, it's really a triple firewall program that was put in place. It began in the 90s with the implementation of a feed ban that said that ruminants, beef, could not receive meat and bone meal, so there was a ban against ruminant feed back to ruminants. And so that was the first step, and that was 1997. And then there began this surveillance of looking at animals that could be suspect animals. It doesn't mean that if an animal's having, some kind of neurological problem that it would be definitely BSE, but those would be the animals that would be more suspect. So then there began a tremendous amount of surveillance of these type animals where they looked for that and sent samples, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of samples all these years to the lab to be carefully checked, for this. And then the last step in this has been the removal of what are called specified risk materials. And those are the materials that if the BSE agent were present, they would be contained in those materials. Principally, that's going to be brain, spinal cord, and associated tissues of the animal, and especially those that would be 30 months of age or older.
Can you get BSE from eating beef itself?
You can't get BSE from eating beef because the BSE agent, if it's present, is going to be in materials like in the spinal cord, the brain, and tissues like that. And for a very age-specific, certain ages of animals, those tissues are removed. And so they're not eligible to be consumed by humans.
In terms of the human version, have we had any cases in the United States?
There's been no record of anybody that has come down with the variant CJD here in the United States that would have gotten it here in the United States. There have been a couple of cases where there are people that have lived here that had the disease and eventually passed away from the disease, but they either spent significant time in Great Britain or someplace in Europe where they may have gotten that.
What is atypical BSE that I hear about sometimes?
Atypical BSE would be something that looks like BSE but is slightly different from when you look under a microscope and you look at the conditions of that. So it's very similar. And the other thing about that is in these cases that are called atypical BSE, they have not had the same source. There would have been no meat and bone meal that would have contained the BSE agent. It's almost like an animal that just had this spontaneous reaction and caused these BSE-like conditions, and that's why, but it's not the same as classical BSE.
What do you tell your friends and family when they ask about the risk of BSE from beef consumption?
I tell my family and my friends, eat beef, enjoy beef. What I feel great about is that there's only been 4 animals here in the United States out of hundreds of millions of animals that have come to market in all this time that we've looked that have been diagnosed with BSE. I have no fear that if there's one next year, or if there was one a year from now or something, that still is not anything that would be of great risk, and because of all the things that have been put in place. And so I have fear nothing about the food supply, the meat supply here with regard to BSE.